Hello, I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman, Chairman of the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee. The American Fire Service is rich in tradition and culture. A firefighter's life is filled with many emotional highs and lows. Stories of major fires, national disasters, medical calls, firehouse living, and family life are often verbally shared from one generation to another. Many times, these stories are lost forever when a firefighter passes away. In an effort to preserve these stories, in 2019, the Greensboro Fire Department History Book Committee launched a new program of recording audio-video of our retirees' lives. These stories will be shared on our website, gfhbc.org. In 2020, we did not record because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Please listen as these firefighters share their life experiences with all of us.
It's Jimmy Lee Joyce, J-O-Y-C-E. I am 61 years old. I was 29 years, 6 months on the fire department, and when I left, my rank was captain. I am from Greensboro here, and mainly McLeansville, just outside of Greensboro is where I grew up at, but always in the Greensboro area. I've never lived anywhere else but here. I'm not related to any fire department members. I knew a few fire department members from the past that I went to church with, Craig Lewis and some of those guys that we played ball together and went to church together. But I had no affiliation with any person or persons on the fire department. Before I joined the fire department, I was in a dead-end job that had absolutely no chance of going anywhere or doing anything. I was never going to make more than $1 above minimum wage, so to speak, doing nothing. I mean, I was young. I was 24 years old. I turned 25 while I was in training. So didn't go to school, just worked fast food, worked odd jobs, and nowhere to go, nothing to do.
Was anything you want to add to that?
The driving force that made me want to be a firefighter was the security. In the beginning, I was at this dead-end job, and my stepdad called and said, "Hey, I just read in the paper where the fire department's taking applications. We know this person and this person, this person, they enjoy their career. You know, this would be good for you to do." And so I put in the application for the fire department and went through the process. But it was about the security. It was about the career in the beginning. Oh, the process for us, you did the application, and then you had to, I remember going to the Employment Security Commission, and you had to put washers on pegs, and you had to put nuts on bolts, and they would time and how many that you put on in a certain amount of time, so they could see if you, I guess, were mechanically inclined or mechanically minded. And then we went to the training center to do a physical agility test. Much different than it is now, because you had to pick up hoses and put them in the back of the truck and take the hoses out of the back of the truck, and the pull-ups and the sit-ups and that kind of thing. And I was, believe it or not, at that age I was in really good shape, so this was not an issue. And you had to climb the tower and raise a palm pier ladder and that type of thing. So it was physically demanding, and when you were done, you were spent, but it's nowhere near like it is now. Our starting salary in 1987, I believe, was $14,800. Now, I was a single man, and coming from a dead-end job, $14,000 a year, man, it was gold. So right now, in today's terms, that doesn't seem like very much, but in 1987, when you're not doing anything, it's great. Oh, I remember most all of them. In my training class, I can name off Steve Fuller, Steve Harriman, Eric Johansson, Brent Gerald, Randy Brand, Tim Midkiff, Barry Smith. It goes on and on and on. So yeah, I still remember all those guys, because it's burned in your mind the time that you spent together at that training center.
Do you remember how long you were in training?
It was we were in training for, I believe it was 17 weeks at that time, and that included EMT, I believe, at that time. So we didn't have, I think now they do training and then EMT, but ours was included in that. Highs and lows during training. The first low that I had was when I got my first test score, because when I had studied, and when I put my answers, everything was written out then, longhand. And so when I looked at my first test score, when they say the word verbatim, what they mean is verbatim. And if you miss one little word, then it's wrong. And that was an eye-opener for me. I mean, I still passed, no problem. But what I thought was going to be an ace was not an ace. So that was the first little wake-up call for it. As far as the highs, I love the camaraderie of the training class. We were really tight. Went out together on weekends and stuff, did things we shouldn't do. But it was a lot of fun during the training class. The first day of training, the tables were set up sort of horseshoe shaped, and I was on the front row, and Bobby Smith, who's passed on now, was sitting beside of me. And we did our morning PT, which they run us to death. And we came in and we sat down, and I didn't know anybody from Adam. We're all scared to death. I mean, anybody that tells you they weren't scared when they came into training, they're lying to you. And I looked at Bobby, and he was basically green. And I was like, this guy's going to be sick. And all of a sudden he threw his chair back and put his hands down like he was fixing to throw up in the floor. And I'm yelling, and they sent a can over, and he threw up right there in the trash can right beside of me. And I mean, you just couldn't get away. And it was almost a stress release for everybody, because then everybody saw, hey man, we're all human, we're all in this together. It could have happened to any one of us. And Bobby even made the joke, said, hey, this will show you not to have orange juice for breakfast. No, we had study sessions when we were together, and you were in squads, red squad, blue squad, this, that, and some of those squads, or those individuals would get together. We did it at Jeff Alton's house a lot of times, and we would get together and we made up questions and then quizzed each other, drilled each other for the questions, just so we could go, answer them without any issue, without any hesitation. So it was always fun. Training was sort of a blur when you were going through in the beginning, because everything is so structured. Your time is completely structured. Your study, your class time, your drill time, everything was completely lined up for you. And so what did it for me, really in my heart, was toward the end of training when your brother passed away. And they came to us and said, we would like some guys to go fill in at the stations. We were far enough along that they trusted us on the calls. We'd like for you guys to come go to the stations, because we want these people to be able to go to the funeral home. And so naturally, we're all volunteering to do this. And I went to Station 5, which was actually going to be my shift with Captain Barnett, Captain Ritter at that time. And when you saw that everybody was human and you weren't bulletproof, then it became more real to me. Then you knew, and when you saw how the firefighters reacted, because Raymond was such a well-liked person, well-respected person, and rightfully so, that you saw how these people viewed him as a person and his career, and then it became more real then, that what you're doing here.
That was good.
My first station assignment was at Station 5 on Engine 5, and my captain was Don Barnett. I loved him as a captain. You almost need to protect him from himself, because Barney could get in trouble, and someone like me who likes to stir trouble is not usually a safe combination. But Barnett was going to have a good time, and I enjoyed him for that. Now, Barnett was going to work, and Barnett was going to do his job, and he was going to do his job well. And he had no problem taking me over in his bedroom or in the office going, "Hey man, you're messing up here. You got to do that. You got to do this and do it right." But I thoroughly enjoyed my time with him.
First assignment.
My first assignment, of course, was Barnett. Jerry Schamberg was the driver, and then Billy Combs and Debbie Butler, who eventually left and went to the police department. We were on the engine. On the ladder truck was Captain Ritter, Chief Ritter later. Charlie Reed was the driver. And on the squad, which was assigned to the truck at that time, was David Spears, Randy Gordon, and Joey McIntyre.
Did you have any nicknames?
In training, it was Double J. It just happened. The nickname they came up with was Double J for Jimmy Joyce, of course. And then after I got to the station, Captain Barnett decided that I needed a new nickname, and it was Pound Cake. Well, he saw that I like to eat, and that I like to eat sweets, which is a problem, of course, for all of us. But it became Pound Cake at that time. The fire department, as far as pranks in the fire service go, in Greensboro Fire Service, they're all the time. When you have a lot of creative people with a few dollars and time on their hand, that's a dangerous thing. And a fireman will work 6 hours on a prank that may last 6 seconds, but it was well worth it. You know, going back to training, I remember we plugged sprinklers on the coldest day of training. It was cold, and you're up in that tower, and Coble and Brooks said, "We're not getting wet." And then Chief Cox comes in and says, "They're going to get wet. If they don't get wet, I'm going to fire you." And so you don't know which way to go. So we were plugging sprinklers, about 6 or 8 inches of water in the floor. You know what I'm talking about. And there sits Coble out on the fire escape, and he turned, smoking a cigarette, and he turned, and when he did, I grabbed him around the chest and brought him through the window to the floor. Now, I paid for that with some laps, you know, but between that kind of prank and training to when you get to the station, there was one call we went to for a fire. It was full alarm. And when we got there, it was a burning pile of dog crap in a bag on the porch. And so we put it out, and we got back to the station. There was a paper bag with some candy bars set in front of the battalion chief's door and set on fire, and so he could come out, and then knocked on his door so he could come out and find his burning bag. I may or may not have been a part of that. I don't know.
I think you were. Who was at the page?
It's some guy named Cockman. I think it was. When we first came on, the union was not active. That I remember, it became more and more active, and the deal was about the extra 15 minutes. You know, being there at 7:45 versus 8 o'clock, and that caused a big riff and lawsuits and everything, and that's when they went to the union stations. I think it was 12 and maybe 20. that were the unions. I know 12 that they separated them because they said, okay, you guys don't have to come in 15 minutes early. The 15 minutes never bothered me. I needed to change clothes. I needed to get my gear on truck. But I think looking back, it was a Band-Aid that needed to be ripped off because you had to fix it in some kind of way. But there was so much animosity between the two sides, between union, let's call them union people and administration and the other side. Most of us in the middle really didn't care. But now the union is a great thing. They do a lot of great stuff. I was never a part of the union, never a member of the union, mainly because when I had to go work at Station 12 with those guys, you know, some of those old heads would look at the newspaper and go, well, we can sue for this, or we can sue for this, or we can sue for this. And it was just so much of a downer, and I was not into that. I wanted to enjoy my career, enjoy my day, and they did not. When I first came to the fire station, Station 5, it was July 1st, it was on Wednesday, and the crews did cook together. Now, I didn't have to cook my first day, but I was told I was cooking the next day. And at Station 5 at that time on that shift, we had what you call cooking wars. Everybody was cooking their own little meal, but they knew that other people didn't like it, hated it. We had people that didn't talk to other people, didn't talk to anybody. You know, certain things were going to be cooked. Charlie Reed, I loved working with him. If it was 110 degrees outside, he was going to cook chili beans. It never failed. Joey McIntyre was going to cook hot dogs. Jerry Schamberg was going to cook what we called heart valves, which was like a beefaroni type thing, but it looked like a heart valve. So we did cook together, and we did eat together. And I enjoyed that time because sitting around that table, you know, for those of us who are talking, you could get conversations, you learn people, especially for a new guy. You learned about the person, about their family, their wives, their kids, their likes, their dislikes, their fire department experiences, their knowledge. So I really enjoyed table. I was an adequate cook. When I began on the fire department, I was able to cook the basics, and you know, I was always under the impression, I'm not going to woo you with my culinary ways, but I'm going to get you by. And that's what it is. When you're cooking the fire department, yeah, good is a plus, but it had to be plenty of it, it had to be done, and it had to be cheap. And that was the main things as far as cooking. And you had to take your turn. If you tried to skip out on your turn, that didn't work very well. It cost me $5 when we walked in for lunch and supper, and that's in 1987. For lunch and supper, cost $5 per man. And then if you had some left over, we had a little kitty, little slush fund that we kept so that you could draw from for the next guy who may go over. The worst part about cooking, to me, in the fire department, was getting the menu. It was, okay, what am I cooking today? Especially lunch, you don't make a sandwich or whatever, but once you had the menu. But when I first came on at Station 5, there's 10 people. So they told me up front, find you a meal, cook your meal. We're only going to eat it one day out of 10. So find the meal, cook the meal, get it right, and you're gold. My favorite dish to cook, because it's my favorite dish to eat, was the firehouse meal. I loved the firehouse meal. That was the first meal that I had at the fire department, and that was the last meal that I had at the fire department. Ours was, I like the Spam animals or the Red Hots that we would cook on the grill, believe it or not, slice of Spam, cook on the grill. Pinto beans, macaroni cheese, slaw and cornbread. I'm not a slaw person. I say, okay, I'll chop it up, but you better put it in because I don't eat it. But that was a firehouse meal, and I loved it. I loved eating it. I loved cooking it. It was good. Dorm living versus cubicle living, I enjoyed the dorm because the conversation. You guys, before going to bed, before going to sleep, if you're laying in bed, you can talk. That's when you got the general conversations about family, about friends, about what you're doing, what's going on. You got to know everybody. You got to learn everybody. You got to blow off steam. But the cubicle, the positive on that is sometimes you just want to be alone. And sometimes you just need that alone. You need that to study. You need it to just think. And so I see the advantage of the cubicle, but for me, the dorm living was better because of the camaraderie that you had with all your team. Our downtime at the fire station, we were playing basketball or ping pong or volleyball. Or when I was at Station 7, every night, depending on weather, the trucks were pulled out and the volleyball net was put up and everybody played, and so you were together. The problem now is the spawn of Satan, that cell phone, because everybody's buried their head into that cell phone and they have nothing to do with anybody else. They're streaming or online or doing a deep dive on something, podcast or whatever, and you lose the conversation with the other employees, with your other teammates, and that is, to me, is terrible. When a retiree visited station, my last station was Station 41, and if a retiree came by the station, we made sure that everybody talked to him, asked him questions, treated him with respect, because this is somebody who gave 30 plus years to the service. This is somebody with a lot of knowledge, not necessarily about how to put out a fire, but a lot of knowledge of the general life of a firefighter and all of his experiences, what he's done. That's such a valuable asset for a retiree to come by the station, and hopefully the firefighters now give them the respect that they deserve. The value of these retiree interviews is to see where these people are and to see where they've come from. You see a lot of careers that everyone has had, and you know how they came through the ranks, for, as far as firefighter or captain or chief or whatever. But you get their perspective, people that I've never worked with, their perspective of their fire service life and their fire service experience. My first call and my first fire was at the same time. It was just a little brush fire, but it was burning, and it was on the first day that I showed up. It was just July 1st of 1987. Burned was the George C. Brown, which was across from Coliseum, huge lumber yard. There was another lumber yard over off the highway that we burned. We had some fires at UNCG. I don't know groundbreaking incidents, but a lot of those were very laborious. We burned one of the old train depots. One night we drug 1,100 foot of hose across the railroad tracks down at the corner, and so it was very labor intensive for those fires. When I came on the fire department, as far as medical calls, we had at Station 5 we had a squad there, so the squad run all the calls, all the medical calls. The only time that the engine, which I was on Engine 5, that would be called out is if you were assisting with lifting a patient or helping with the patient. And so there were times when, if the squad wasn't there, that they may send the engine that's closer. But we didn't ride a lot of medical calls. And to be honest with you, that was okay with me. I tell everybody I applied as a firefighter, not as a medical technician. Now, in the future, of course, medical calls are our bread and butter. I mean, it's 80+% of our calls are medical calls, and they send the first engine, now that we don't have the squads, send that first engine there. And it's good because we are the first one, we beat EMS there, not because they're slow, but because they're coming from the other side of the county. And when you can put your hands on somebody in less than 5 minutes, it has a better outcome. When 9/11 happened, I was on vacation. I was at the beach, at Myrtle Beach with my family. And I remember we got up and we're getting ready for the beach and turned on the TV because I'm a news guy, and the first plane had already hit. And so I was sat there in amazement, watching this thing burn, And then my family went out on the beach, and I stayed, and the second plane hit. And I'm staying, and then all of a sudden the towers are falling. And it didn't sink into me the gravity of the situation when it happened. To me, at that split minute, it was like, well, New York lost 2 big buildings. This is, wow, that's crazy. But then later on that night, when you see the true loss of life that had happened, then it hit me as far as this is big. And they start counting the number of firefighters, the number of police officers, the number of emergency workers that were lost. Then everything sinks in, and it's a depression. That's when it becomes hard on you. 9/11 was tough. I mean, you wanted to do something, but you didn't know what to do. Some guys were able to go to New York to do some different things after the fact, but you just didn't have a clue what to do. You never want another 9/11 to happen, but what I really want is a 9/12, because on the 12th of September, this country was together. This country was united. This country had a common purpose, a common goal. There was no division like it is today. Everybody was one, had one purpose, one focus, and that's what this country needs now. We need a 9/12, not a 9/11. Those guys that were good individuals, the Jesse Walker, the Gary Church, the Bill Browns, and these were the guys that no matter what call you're on or what was going on, were never excited. They were calm, they were collected, and it was that guy that could stand back and go, okay, here's what we need to do. Not afraid to make a decision, but just not going crazy at the time. As far as a fire department employee, David Spears. When I first came on at Station 5, David Spears was on the squad, and he was studying for the captain's test. He had a regimented day. This many hours he studied this, this many hours he studied this, and this many. He was focused on what he was going to do, and that was something that impressed me, was that he had his goal, he knew what he was going to do. So as a fire department employee, it's got to be Spears. The biggest challenges during my career weren't really in the beginning of my career. My biggest challenge in my career was after I made officer, is dealing with the med calls. And what I mean by that is, before, when you go on a med call, you do the job, you're robotic almost. I would not change one thing about that.
What was your most heartbreaking moment, or not to be able to, or whatever? Any heartbreaking moments stand out in your mind?
The most heartbreaking moments in my career, and in most people's career, is the call with kids. Anything that had to do with children, that's what broke your heart. When a mother runs out of the house and hands you an infant that's unresponsive, or a SIDS baby, or so, and it's a load and go. When the EMS pulls up, you're gone. Remember the question.
What was your most heartbreaking moment?
Heartbreaking moments for me were always with the children. Any call that were kids involved, babies that you couldn't save, mothers that ran out of the house with the babies, handing them to you. Any fires that you went on that were children involved, children that passed. I can remember many times coming back to the station 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, calling home, say, put your eyes on my son. Check him, make sure he's okay. Because you had just dealt with someone's child, and you were concerned about your own. So any time with the kids, that was the heartbreaking ones for me. My proudest moment in the fire department, I've got a few. One, I won Employee of the Year for the fire department. Had to do with my work for the trail response team, the bike team. I was very instrumental in the bike team happening. when I first came to Station 41. Ann Burnham was there, and she approached me and said, look, we have these trails, but we don't have any kind of response that we do on them. All the watershed trails around the lakes, and helped put together the bikes. First it was hiking, and I was the one who came with to EMT, our EMT coordinator, and said, hey, can we do backpacks? And he ordered the backpacks as a trial. Engine 41 was the first one that had those. And we used them there, and we were the test case for the rest of the fire department. And now everybody has backpacks, and they've probably had 2 or 3 different kinds of backpacks since I left the fire department. So the trail response thing was big. I would say, well, we thought if hiking is good, biking's better. And so we were able to get with the police, Art Hollis, Tim Tepedino. Those guys were very instrumental in the beginning as far as getting us bikes. I was the first one to go through the bike training class with the police department, sort of a test case, and then we sent the entire station through the bike class. And so I was really proud of that. I remember the day that I won Employee of the Year, that I was pretty sure that I was going to fall 3 or 4 times before I got to the stage, because it was just so nervous. So that was a proud moment for me. Another proud moment was promotion. When they called me upstairs to promote me to captain. Chief Teeters, Chief Spears, Chief Shoemate. I was so nervous, I couldn't talk. And so luckily they did all the talking. I remember at the very end when I stood up and Chief Spears put my badge on me, that I said something like, I'll do my best not to let you down. And that's really all that I could come up with. So those are very proud moments for me on the fire department.
For our listeners that don't know what, tell them just a little briefly objective what the bike trail team does.
The bike team on the fire department, in around the watershed area, there are miles and miles of trails that are used, and upwards at peak time, there's probably 30,000 people a month that use those trails. And so when you got that many people on the trails, you've got to provide some level of protection for them. So what we did, Chief Zimmerman, who was my battalion chief at the time, his son, for his Eagle project, did Owl's Roost Trail as far as making markers so you could see a number every quarter mile that you went. Well, then once I got there and he got there, we decided we were going to do all the trails. So we marked all the trails. And now when there's a call on it, if you can see a sign or you pass the sign with a number, that number is distinct. And it comes up on the computer on the trucks. So they know exactly where you are. If you can see water, you're going out on a boat. So you're trained to take people out that way. The bike team also would do special events, 4th of July, Christmas downtown, Christmas tree lighting, anything like that. A&T Homecoming, I loved working A&T Homecoming. It was a great day. Those people were so good to us. Man, we could go through and we could eat whatever we wanted to eat. And it was a fun time. But the bikes provided a level of protection that you couldn't get otherwise in crowds, in different venues. So still a good program, still a good project that's going on, hopefully. Coping with the passing of a patient, people have different ways of dealing with that, different ways of coping with that. Unfortunately, sometimes that's laughter or joking. You have to joke it off. You don't do it in front of the parents or the patient, but you have to do something. Talking about it is really good, especially among your crew. Hey, this happened, could we have done something a little better? Could we have done something different? So it's really different. The biggest one for me, when I was at Station 5, old Station 5, they were teaching me to drive. I had always driven big trucks, but those fire trucks were a different animal, especially with the double clutching and the whole different gear pattern. And the squad was gone, and so we got dispatched on a med call that was just right around the corner, Villa Drive. It's just, third gear from the station. And I pulled right up, it was great, and they went inside, and it was a suicide. And I was outside watching the truck, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go inside and see if they need any help, see what's going on. And when I went in, the person had hung themselves, and they had already taken him down. And this guy was laying on the floor, and they were working on him furiously, and his parents are there, and he was a gray that you can't describe. But when I walked in the door, his eyes were locked dead on me. And later that night, I was laying in the bed at the fire station, and the only thing I could see was that guy's eyes. And I decided right then, okay, you're going to have to learn to deal with this, or you got to go. One of the two is going to have to happen. And I was able to learn to deal with it. Family and faith was not a part of my beginning. I was single, young, living at home. I had it made. Now later on, when marriage and children and stuff come along, family and faith is of utmost importance. You're gone 24 hours at a time. I mean, you're gone 1 day out of 3. You're out of commission, and that's tough on a family a lot of times. And as far as the faith, when I became a Christian, I had to rely on that and on my faith, and especially when those times when those victims, those calls bothered you, that you needed something, another release. And prayer would do that for me. My health after leaving the fire department began to decline. I have severe neuropathy that I deal with. I had a bout with bladder cancer that I am 6 years past now. So I get a checkup every year now. It was every 6 months. Now it's every year. So that's good. Hopefully that was a one-time thing. So I'm still upright and self-propelled. So I think I'm happy with it. The advice that I would give a new firefighter, first off, I would want to talk to the firefighter that's going to stay here. Too many times people are hired, and you don't know when you hired them. Too many times people that are hired nowadays, they can work 2 years, 3 years, and they're gone. I want to talk to the guy. When I walked in the door, I knew that I was going to be at the fire department 30 years. And I want to talk to the guy or girl that's going to be there 30 years. I want to talk to that person. And I think one of the first things I want to tell them is to remember that most of the people that you come in contact with, it's the worst day of their life. And you need to respect that it's the worst day of their life. Don't discard something. Don't blow something off. We didn't call you for nothing. This is important to us, and this is the worst day of their life. So respect that. Do that. And another thing, watch your money. Watch your money. Don't rely on part-time money. Get a good family life balance.
What would you like for the fire department to remember about Jimmy Joyce?
I want the fire department to remember that I was faithful, that I was loyal to the fire service, to the Greensboro Fire Department. I want to know that they could count on me. I wasn't the guy that was running over you leaving the building. I was more the guy running over you going into the building. I want you to know that I could be somebody that can be counted on, somebody that you could call. I want my family to know that I did something that made me worthy. I was dedicated to a service that was important, that made a difference. Fire department, a fireman, it becomes from what you do to what you are. And I appreciated that about my career in the fire department. I want my family to know that I was there, that I put myself put others before myself. If I left a special message to someone, it would be to my 5-month-old grandson. It would be to tell him that Pop Pop made a difference in somebody's life. At some point, somewhere, somebody's better, somebody's life is better, somebody's home is better because of something that I said or did.
Great answer. Perfect. That was good, Jimmy. That was great. In closing, the Greensboro Firefighters History Book Committee hopes you have gained a greater insight into the dangers, the challenges, and emotional events that have influenced and shaped the American firefighter.